that last year of being a founder, I tried to pivot my B2C tutoring company, a platform to match students and tutors together based on the strength of their personality compatibility. I tried to pivot that and sell that platform to the enterprise for corporate mentorship programs. And yeah, long story short, had I had more success with that journey, I perhaps wouldn't be here today. Nevertheless, this is really sort of my sort of personal learning experiences of how I would have tried to do things differently if I could get in a time machine and go back and start my journey again as a founder. So indeed, strict policies, and it of course depends on the problem that you've identified and that you're solving. Having said that, it is a necessary but not sufficient criteria that you have to, for example, look at compliance with things like GDPR and ISO standards perhaps, or also HDS compliance if you're a medical startup looking to sell to French customers. And so, yeah, being aware of the policies that apply to your respective industries, and at the same time realizing that product market fit is a dynamic process, that once that first customer is engaged with, that's wonderful. And once that first proof of concept is signed, you're off to the races. And yet, it can really be tempting, I remember, to think that a proof of concept and being able to reference a big institution, say like Daimler, on an investor deck can feel like you've arrived. And yet, really, that is only the beginning, because a proof of concept to a team at a large corporate is essentially a trampoline, because what I truly believe is that the end goal for a B2B startup like yours is a global enterprise license. And so moving from a proof of concept to selling a license to the team that has agreed to that proof of concept, to then looking at how you can leverage that one license to engaging with other teams and eventually the entire institution. And so that is about hearing the feedback that the customer is giving at the proof of concept stage and nurturing those relationships. And so, yeah, while it is not the easiest of exercises to juggle pipeline with onboarding and activation and support, I think, like, if you do have that first customer, there's so much to be gained from, encouraging that customer and nurturing that relationship instead of looking at then trying to sign a proof of concept with the next customer. And I think that's very much about the outbound. I think the exercise also requires some introspection, because the founding teams of startups, without wanting to state the obvious, their skill sets vary. And so not everyone is as effective a salesperson, and vice versa, not everyone is as effective a technical person. So I think it's really important for founding teams to have a candid moment of introspection and a candid conversation internally to say, okay, who is going to be the person that owns the sales process, and who is going to be the person who then can take the feedback from that proof of concept, for example, put it on the product roadmap. And so, a separation of tasks. And if that salesperson isn't there, there are salespeople as a service, if you will, that can do the lead generation process and really make sure that your skill sets are best utilized to the opportunities which are presented to you. We've been through the finding champions on the inside, and I think what I briefly alluded to at the start is that the enterprise sales process is not just a matter of targeting decision makers at the large institutions. It's also about looking at the whole ecosystem that surrounds these decision makers. The system integrators, and they can be the likes of Deloitte, KPMG, as well as companies like Oracle. And so with the Oracle for Startups program, for example, because our cloud is in growth mode, we are looking for accelerating the journey of companies, and we don't take equity with our startup program. What we do, and there'll be similar arrangements with other sort of partner companies, is we have, if you will, almost a form of soft equity, that if you're building on our cloud, then we can have that assurance that from a technology perspective, we can stand by your product when it's hosted on our cloud and we take it to our customers, and then you can have these synergistic relationships with corporates like Oracle for co-selling, and be that through startup programs or other avenues. And so you can target large corporates directly, you can go through system integrators, through partners, and also looking at, depending on the size and complexity of your offering, if you're perhaps more on a SaaS basis or on an enterprise basis, then if it's self-service, then great, and you can look for volume through more automated sales processes like listing on a cloud marketplace perhaps. When it comes to the enterprise process, really beginning to look at what an RFI is, and crucially how you can sit alongside bigger institutions like Oracle, who have that brand recognition that sort of takes some of that groundwork away from having to be a recognizable brand that an institution will work with, because we all know this, having said that, it bears reinforcing that for a large corporate to work with a startup like yours, it can be a risk. And so to have some of that risk sort of minimized by joining an RFI alongside a company like Oracle, where the complementarity of your solution to a broader product offering, I think Oracle has hundreds if not thousands of products. I actually really know this, but in any case, having the specialty of the solution that you guys have provided with your domain expertise, combined with the breadth and depth of product offerings like a company like Oracle can offer, as well as that brand recognition, is another sort of winning strategy to maximize the success in your enterprise sales efforts. And you guys wouldn't be here today if you didn't believe that your solution is better, faster, more secure, and it's a pleasure to be able to share this room with founders that are solving solutions with AI, because AI is that transformational technology which is leading to this next industrial revolution that we all know about. So I think it's balancing that ability to know that your solution is solving these relevant problems with the right channels and the right partners to make that belief a reality with customer adoption. And so indeed that confirmation comes in a number of ways. And networking has been different, of course, in these COVID times, and yet we all know how to send sort of cold outreach on LinkedIn, and the double opt-in process, and yet at the same time too, I think really when it comes to asking for a warm introduction, making sure that that double opt-in process is followed is a real game changer that I wish I saw more startups do. So just in case anyone needed a reminder, always do the double opt-in. And indeed, we've been through the indirect sales channel. So what that looks like, for example, with a cloud marketplace, is that if your solution is running on the Oracle cloud, then what you can do is you can activate the army as a service, if you will, of sales colleagues that big corporates like Oracle have, who are looking to grow their cloud sales consumption targets, and if they can do that indirectly by selling a solution like yours to their existing customers, then everyone stands to win. And what we're going to look at now is how to articulate that value proposition, because what is super important is not only demonstrating the value that your solution offers to all stakeholders, it's narrowing that value proposition and tailoring its expression to your target audience. And so, for example, if your target audience is an indirect sales process, like empowering an Oracle sales representative, if that's what you're looking to do, then the emphasis on your solution, your delta, should be how are you going to help that sales rep grow their cloud consumption. If, on the other hand, you're targeting a decision maker at a large corporate, and I love the analogy that your solution should be positioned as an aspirin and less as a vitamin. And so it's, how are you going to save time? How are you going to save money? And when those things are articulated and ideally quantified, then really, it's almost a sales process that completes itself. And so articulating that value proposition, making it relevant to the audience, condensing it. So what is the single most attention grabbing hook, as I call it perhaps, piece of information that you can provide to your audience to get their attention. And then also making sure that that value that you're offering is secure. And so, for example, Y Combinator have a wonderful set of, I guess you could call it, open source agreements, be that from an intellectual property protection perspective, or a sales contract for proof of concepts, enterprise licenses. You can start to tailor that, take it to a lawyer that you might be working with, and not have to go through the whole document drafting process, which will be far more costly than just a document review. So yeah, taking those template documents from Y Combinator, if you don't have them already, making sure that your IP is protected, making sure that the terms of your engagement are well defined. So then the number of end users, for example, that a proof of concept allows for your solution to be put in the hands of, and making sure that that number of end users is stuck to, having a mechanism in place, if that's not stuck to, that you have recourse to allow for you to, worst case scenario, protect your IP, and best case scenario, move from a proof of concept to a wider license sale, because more people in the institution want to use your solution. So indeed, the idea that people make their own luck, and a little tongue-in-cheek Die Hard reference. With solution selling, really looking at spending more time listening than talking. And there's this pretty dramatic stat that shows almost a linear correlation between the amount of time spent listening and the likelihood of success of a sale closing. So more time spent listening, and how is that active listening process most effectively conducted? It's looking at those open-ended questions. So who, what, where, when, and really uncovering that pain point that your specific audience member has, to then best position your aspirin as the remedy to that pain point. And again, really thinking about this as an iterative process. So yeah, getting that proof of concept to an enterprise global license, and then getting that marquee customer reference, which allows you to expand into other companies in that industry, and then beyond globally. So you can also look, for example, at taking a license agreement with a representative of a company in one country and selling to another team at that same company in a different country. And that kind of proof of value that is provided by having the buy-in from the office of one country in another country is worth its weight in gold. So, perhaps a little ahead of time, I feel like I've talked enough, and very keen to take any questions that you guys might have.
Can I just agree with everything you said? Hi, I'm Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. So I actually went through the same process that you suggest as a success in the function of customer success management, and we did just that with an AI-driven talent marketplace. I'm now running my own thing. I actually teach to do these success strategies, other startups. But what you're saying, identifying the key champion and nurturing relationship with them, starting with a POC and a few licenses, and then showing the value continuously to actually explain that your solution deserves a global rollout, and then rolling out globally with that solution is the way to conquer an enterprise. The only thing I want to mention here is that it is very, very tricky to identify at the sales process the problem with the new solution that this specific enterprise may need, and I would like to hear from you, how do you identify that slightly open door at the enterprise of a problem that can lead to the global rollout?
Thank you, Lisa. And first and foremost, I'll be Venmoing you the $100 that we agreed to for the agreement before. No, kidding. But
no problem. I have money.
So on identifying the pain point, indeed, it is a non-trivial exercise, because what one team may have well covered through their own procurement process might be a glaring lack for another team, and so it's just conversations, and picking up the phone. I think it's one thing that a mentor of mine says to me, like, Max, like, you young guys, like, you just do everything through WhatsApp and LinkedIn, pick up the phone. And so, just have conversations, and the more conversations, the more open-ended questions, the more active listening, the more likelihood of finding a problem that needs to be solved. How well does that answer your question?
Then another question emerges, which is what if no one wants to talk to you? Because you need to have that little, and I don't want to give the solution that I found personally, professionally, to find it. I want to hear, how do you find, without the ability to talk to anyone in the corporate, what is that problem that people will want to talk to you about?
Yeah.
Without calling it a problem, which is in most cases the situation. No one wants to have problems.
Good point, indeed. I would say, without wanting to sound too corny, like persistence, in a polite way. And if a solution is relevant with the work that's gone into it, then a first outreach on LinkedIn might not be answered. Perhaps there's a mutual connection who can then follow up and create that connection and allow for a conversation to happen. And if it's not a mutual connection, perhaps it's just remembering who those prospects are and looking at the relevant industry events that are going on in the coming quarter and trying to meet that person at an event. So just polite persistence, I would say. How do you do it?
How do I do it?
You said,
So I have one point, which is be more interested in the business of your client than in your own.
Absolutely.
Which basically actually very much relates to what you are saying. When you follow someone on LinkedIn, you can get exposed to what they post, what they are looking for, and that could be a good conversation starter. about persistence, probably persistence, but actually, again, nurturing the relationship, because it takes time sometimes until actually the organization can trust you, and organization is always about people. So find people who will trust you to solve their problem, and gradually get there. That's how I see it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sylvia. Yeah.
I think the startups or entrepreneurs sometimes we're more in love in our product than in the problem that we want to solve.
Great.
I just got a recommendation once is fall in love in the problem that you're trying to solve more than in your solution.
Love it. Yeah.
I was wondering what kind of solutions the Oracle sales reps are selling. Like, could you give an example?
Yeah, and so it's, I think, there's hundreds of solutions that are on their cloud. Okay,
Products.
thank you, Tiffany. So 10,000 products, 10,000.
What's
And
most
so-
popular?
And so then it's like, of course, those products themselves fall into categories, and then it's like identifying the category that your solution exists in, and targeting the partners that that your solution offers something that is perhaps on their roadmap, or that is not even like conceived of. Like, so with the deep learning startup for OCR that I mentioned at the start, their tech was on the roadmap. Having said that, it was so advanced, and the accuracy that they received was so strong that it's like, okay, like, we want to OEM this instead of spending another 12 months developing it, because these guys are domain experts. And so if you can find like the partner, the product suite, and understand how yours complements that particular offering, that's what I'd say. Yeah.
So, thanks for your talk. Your talk is named Growth Hacking Through Corporate Partnership. So, that initiates a partnership between a startup and a corporate. I'm curious, based on your experience, what are some, zooming out, the risks on both sides, so for corporates and startups, that need to be taken into account when going for such a partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. And a technological risk, because when it comes to introducing a corporate to a startup solution, the emphasis has been on the development of the product rather than necessarily on creating enterprise-grade cloud architectures, which will mean that things like DDoS attacks, things like disaster recovery mechanisms are put in place. So with a partnership, I won't get too salesy, but like, so with Oracle for Startups, for example, we have an initiative called Fire Up, which is one whereby when a startup comes and wants to benefit from those customer introductions, that will actually for free look at your architecture and put in all the high availability, all the cybersecurity things, which means that your solution is ready for that corporate partner. So security is one, and then it's intellectual property. So yeah, making sure that it's understood the licenses of your partner that you're using, and then the licenses which you're selling, so that eventually there's no ambiguity as to what the terms of the partnership you have agreed to imply. So cybersecurity, commercial terms, and then of course reputational, and that happens as a result of working together and gaining that trust that things can be done effectively. So I'd say those are the three risks. Please.
How do you feel about charging for POCs?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and that as a startup founder, like, in terms of getting that initial revenue, it can be beneficial. The thing is that revenue is not necessarily going to be recurring. So, like, a hard charging investor might come back and argue with you, like, well, you're essentially just billing for consultancy work. And so I think if the runway can afford it, doing free POCs is really powerful. Because who doesn't like free? And I think anecdotally I've heard that that's how Snowflake got such initial success and their initial track record, is that they took it one step further, and they actually raised money to pay system integrators to do free proof of concepts for their customers. So I think that sort of using that loss leader, almost Uber model of gaining customers with free POCs that you pay the system integrators for. Wow. So yeah, I think thanks for saying.
How should you handle enterprises who don't acknowledge the problem they have? Because, for example, when you offer a solution that's either better or faster or more secure, 9 times out of 10, manager is just saying that it works right now. So why should we use this product instead? Because right now we are sure that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say the change of culture is another big challenge and a big risk, because it sometimes is the case that a solution is so powerful that it actually risks headcount for a manager, and the manager's like, yeah, I really like my database administrator, for example. I don't want an autonomous product. And so they're saying yeah, we're not here to replace, we're here to complement, to make more efficient, and then ideally providing numbers as to how you can free up that person's time to do more high value work is one way that I look at it.
So it's a bit different as a question, but how do you deal with the intellectual properties on a very early stage? Like, as instance, now I'm in the phase I'm gonna start a startup, but I'm not talking with anyone today here about this idea. How do you deal with this? I mean, you cannot have an NDA with you all the time.
Yeah, right. And it's it's a really nebulous question, because it's yeah, I mean, you can ask for an NDA, but then as an early stage startup founder, are you really going to enforce that NDA in a worst case scenario, with all the hundreds of thousands of legal costs? So, and at the same time, you want to speak to as many people as possible, because that's about finding product market fit. And so I guess guiding questions for me are how replicable is the tech? So if it's something that is written in fairly high level languages like Python and could be thrown together by an internal development team, then I'd perhaps wait a bit longer and have an MVP to get that in front of customers. If it's something a bit more low level, you guys are writing in C++ and are providing an NLP library to extend TensorFlow, then I'd feel quite confident talking about that, because the number of decision makers who then have the inroads to go and talk to the development team and then get that on the roadmap, that's quite unlikely that would happen. So I'd say it's a function of the complexity of the product.
Okay. Thank you.
What else?
What other question? Yes, thank you. So my question is about, typically when you talk to enterprises, they seem very interested, and sometimes you talk with them for months and months and months, and they seem to be so excited to be in this cloud of ideas, and they don't want to actually go forward with the product and make actual decisions. And how do you break through that and actually go to, because oftentimes you're also talking to maybe the wrong person within the organization. So how do you find the right decision makers and make them actually make those decisions?
Yeah, right. And that was one of my big mistakes, I think, was that I got discouraged too early when I was a founder trying to sell B2B, because it just felt like a never-ending process. And so what I've learned since is just asking some guiding questions if a conversation is dragging on. So to the person that you're talking to, how often have you been involved in a procurement process, for example? Or like who else might need to have eyes on this before it goes to procurement? Or when was the last time that you bought a startup solution? And then, when more is discovered about the, decision-making power, for want of a better word, of the person that you're talking to, then it can allow for the prioritization of that conversation, or perhaps another one.
And maybe a question to follow up on that. What are your maybe typical red flags that you see in companies, and then that you're like, okay, those companies you should not go and then deal with? Because sometimes we talk to companies, and I talked to an innovation manager, and he told me we've worked with many startups, but none of them succeeded. That's something that he bluntly told me. So what are these types of red flags where you're like, just run away?
I need to give that a second of thought. I don't know if I could talk necessarily about red flags. I could definitely think of some orange flags. And so some orange flags could be, for example, like an interest in innovation as a broad concept rather than innovating in a specific area. And I think also it's like this chicken and egg scenario where actually the later stage a startup is, and like the more fundraising they have, like it's this unfortunate like badge of confidence almost that a lot of decision makers need. It's like, okay, like they're Series A, they're Series B. So I think one, you got to find the innovator, like that sort of early adopter who actually wants to solve a problem and has the buying power. And then also like trying to have as many validations, if you will. So if it's not necessarily a Series A, then membership of a corporate acceleration program, or like prominent board members, or all these other things which can help the early adopter convince other internal stakeholders, like, yes, we need to work with this company. And we still have plenty of time.
Any ideas on how to validate sales funnels, especially with early stage startups who are targeting, or let's say creating a new market and offering a new service that doesn't exist in the market?
Yeah, and it's an interesting challenge because often those companies like have the most interesting solutions, and yet the decision makers aren't even aware that such a solution exists. So I'd say first and foremost, it's about top of the funnel. So creating content that will educate your prospective buyers that this new technology has emerged, and that you are the main experts when it comes to this new technology. So it's frustrating because it takes that much more time to both educate and then sell to a customer. And yet, in terms of gaining market segment, like you guys can really become the go-to, like if there's just that sort of long game, if you will, of education, selling, and then, yeah. What else? Perhaps there are solutions in the audience that are looking for a corporate partner. What is your solution working on, Ahmed?
It's a voice assistant that is highly specialized for the biomedical research environment. So mainly pharma companies, R&D, and drug discovery.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what have been some challenges that you've faced so far?
It's definitely the sales funnel. So right now we're conducting a couple of pilot projects with research institutions, which is going very well. And we can see the added value that we're actually doing more clients. However, the market is very segmented, let's say, and we have academia, we have industries, we have startups, we have small biotechs. It's a lot of kind of funnels to go through, but also at the same time we actually still don't understand how we can exactly, let's say, go through these sales funnels or what other things. So that's why I asked the question, just to really understand. Maybe as you mentioned, the educational process and maybe like the awareness of the product can be a very important role at the moment to what we are doing kind of through our pilot projects. However, it's still very vague, I would say.
And indeed, like that's one aspect. Thanks for that, because that's one aspect of the conversation that we haven't really looked at. It's content, and so yeah, generating those leads not necessarily on a bespoke one-to-one outreach to these prospective buyers, but actually getting some inbound traffic through establishing thought leadership for your product. And that's the creation, for example, of white papers. That's the creation of one-pages. That's the creation of a range of different mediums and content, and creating that content to demonstrate that you are the thought leaders in this specific area, and then distributing that content through platforms like LinkedIn, through Facebook ads, through Twitter, and then having that on an opt-in basis. So while it's nice to have as much information as possible from a prospective buyer, actually as little as first name, last name, email address is all that is needed to then feed those contacts into an email nurture campaign with a tool like Eloqua, for example. And what that means is that you can get an indication of the buying interest of your prospective customers before reaching out to them directly. And yeah, there is obviously a cost associated with this, and the cost of impressions continues to rise. So for you to get the time and engagement from a senior decision maker, like we could be talking about anywhere close to 500 euros perhaps for an email address from a high value decision maker. And yet, if the budget allows that, like, what a way to create an audience, and that audience can then become ambassadors. And once those ambassadors are aware of just how knowledgeable you are about your specific industry and how your product is disrupting that industry, they might not each be buyers in the near term, but they're encouraging that word of mouth, which can facilitate that inbound traffic. And so, yes, hacking the enterprise, so to speak, is also very effective through direct, and yeah, that indirect focus on content is also super important. Yeah. What else, Mara? Yes.
So to complement that, I mean, I get the volumes up. And do you have any tips or tactics in order to, I mean, outreach? I mean, going after them one by one could be tiresome and inefficient. So, I mean, on original sales, it's usually you talk about the numbers game.
And so, encouraging those numbers, there's the content side, and there's also the event side, and having yourself as a salesperson, and also your teammates being there. And for example, yeah, I'm a true believer in sort of old-fashioned, low-tech things like flyers, like printed on quality paper with the right finish, and just having something tangible and memorable. Because I feel like we're almost going full circle when it comes to the digital customer acquisition. That online channels are so saturated that it's so expensive and so time-consuming to get in front of the right people through that means. That being in person and having the right collateral and then relying a bit on inbound also can be another way to play the numbers game.
Can I follow up with a question?
Please.
So what about then if you go full circle to actually bring in hunters that are sort of their job to get meetings or,
Yeah.
or phone calls rather than doing it yourself? That you had it on one of the slides, I think.
Yes, and thank you for that prompt again. Yeah, so that Army as a service can be through a corporate partner. It can also be through consultant hunters, and then it's really important to make sure that incentives are aligned. So essentially being crystal clear, for example, that the revenue share agreement is a percentage of first year revenue of the agreement that a consultant hunter might bring in. So first year revenue, not lifetime revenue, and then paying that at like 15% maybe, for 15 to 30% for software, and then having regular check-ins. So yeah, even if they're independent subcontractors, really making sure that they feel part of the team and that their work is recognized, not just when they bring in those deals, also just for their efforts, and any kind of decentralized CRM, if you will, so a Google Sheet which you can share with your outside consultants and where they can report on their activities, just again to create that sense of ownership and accountability. Yeah, indeed, it's another really valuable channel. Thanks.
I always try to think about, like, where does my audience live and what are they consuming?
Yeah.
So are they reading research reports? Are they reading analyst reports? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on Twitter? Sometimes it varies depending on the industry, but sometimes it varies depending on the country too, right, and the region. So trying to figure out, like, are they at, you know, an orthopedic, are they part of an orthopedics association, like, depending on who they are, and trying to touch them in some way that's not just like a direct phone call, but maybe like joining an association where you know that those target customers are, and as Max said, hopefully now going in person, right, and trying to get in front of them. So I always just try to figure out, like, what's the life cycle of like my customer and what are they consuming and where are they consuming it, and then trying to get in, hopefully from a thought leadership perspective, not from a sales perspective, but adding what you know about your industry or your solution and how it can help.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another question.
Yeah, so we're talking about marketing. So I was wondering what you thought was better. Would it be better to invest your marketing budget into like promoting yourself as an individual, or promoting your company, or promoting the solution?
It's a really good question, and I think it depends on the product. So for a company like Palantir, for example, like you're talking like multi-million licenses, and like for that kind of spend, like your buyer will probably want to talk to Alex Park, like, and so like having more of a sort of emphasis on the founder for costlier licenses, I'd say, would be one thing. And yeah, so I think that answers the question, perhaps.
Thanks, that was surprising. It's the opposite of what I thought you would say. But yeah. Thanks.
What other questions might you have to?
Let's say if I were to partner with Oracle, what kind of startups do you look for? What is a perfect startup?
Right, and so it's one of the super cool things about our work is that we're an R&D. So what that means is that we don't have sales targets, and essentially the perfect startup could be a social impact company from a renewability perspective, could be a machine learning company. So for example, Aleph Alpha is training GPT-3 on the Oracle Cloud. So on the one hand, we have cutting edge NLP. On the other, we have Agro Scout from Israel, who have a drone solution for maximizing the yield of crops. So the perfect startup is one with impact and is one that can be enabled further with cloud and customer introductions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Maybe you have mentioned